Welcome everyone again to another session of Gibran in Arabic, part of the Nostalgic Remembrance Project under the Adwaq Center for Spirituality, Culture and the Arts. We are continuing our live reading and translation of Khalil Gibran's Rasail, treatises, letters in Arabic, from diaspora to his friend and contemporary Arab poet Amin al-Ghraib. And we're continuing again with this rather long second letter that we are translating gradually. And he continues and he says, yesterday we finished with Gibran sort of commenting on the fact that al-Manfaluti, who was a very prominent Arab Egyptian poet at the time, a contemporary of Gibran, had written a critique about one of Gibran's stories. Now Gibran continues and says, أشغالي في هذه الأيام أشبه شيء بسلسلة ذات حلقات آخذ بعضها برقاب البعض. He says, my work nowadays is like something is most similar to a chain with rings, that each of the projects, or each chain, each ring in this chain takes and drags the neck of the other ones behind it. And this is again one of those areas where Gibran is sort of reiterating what he has been mentioning over and over again, which is that the artist should view his life as part of a story. One scene gives way to the next. One act, one chapter gives way to the next. You know, it's not disconnected. It should not feel disconnected. As an artist grows and develops in their craft throughout their life, they should not be perceiving the project they worked on 20 years ago as being completely different and dissimilar to what they're working on now. But rather, it is a continuous journey. Somehow, some way, from one aspect, from one dimension, it is all connected. Right? So, you know, this is what Gibran had mentioned earlier. If you remember, he said that, you know, my soul has grown. Or he tells his friend Amin al-Ghraib, he says, this journey is very important because it's going to bring my past and connect it. All my previous writings, it's going to push it to my coming future. So we should view these circumstances and these projects that we're working on, even if they seem drastically different, as we explore different parts of ourselves, it is still parts of ourselves. They're not parts of somebody else. And, you know, you might fluctuate between different interests, between different parts of your persona. But the fact of the matter remains is that it is still you. And you're exploring. You're like at an artist workshop. You're exploring with your different colors, your different sounds, your different words, your different registers. And that's normal until it all comes together in some type of whole, in some type of reality that makes sense. And here Gibran continues to comment about how the artist, this idea of going through a change. And in terms of this theme of being the work being like rings in a chain is that as we go from one ring in the chain to the next, we feel like we're going through changes. Or it could just feel like improvement. You keep working at a craft, molding and molding at your craft until you feel like you are developing, but it could also be that you leave it and you go to something else and then you come back to it and so on and so forth. So he says, وَقَدْ تَغَيَّرَتْ طُرُقُ مَعِيشَتِي وفقدت شيئا من لذة الانفراد التي كانت تعانق نفسي قبل أن أحلم بباريس وبالسفر إليها. He says, the ways of my life have changed. I have lost some of the sweetness that I find in loneliness. That sweetness that used to embrace my soul before I started dreaming of Paris and traveling to Paris. So he's going through changes which might not seem to have anything to do with his art or his craft. You know, if we look at the surface level, what does loneliness have to do with, or seeking loneliness have to do, seeking loneliness or not seeking loneliness, what does that have to do with being a writer or a painter? Of course, anybody who is an artist knows that it has everything to do with being an artist, with everything to do with being a painter or a writer or a musician or a sculptor, right? But if we go a little bit deeper in the surface, it's not that loneliness might help you in your writing process or in your art, in your artistic craft. But it's this idea that being an artist makes you, as we have been mentioning before, being an artist, meaning being either a painter, a musician, a writer, one of these visible forms of art that, as we said, Nietzsche has mentioned that creativity exists in everything in life, but it finds its most pure or its purest expression in the arts, what we consider to be the arts. Without a doubt, there is creativity in every single discipline, in every single craft. And so being a writer or a musician or a painter grants you this particular insight and awareness of the changes you're going through as a human being and what those changes mean. Right? Why are you feeling lonely? And why is your interest and your craving of loneliness waning? And now you seek perhaps to be around other people. Or perhaps your entire life you fluctuate between seeking company of other people and between the desire to be lonely. Now, I believe that artists need both in varying degrees. We satiate our senses with sources, sensory information for the next work of art, but then we need to retreat and process that. Or as I like to call it, some things need to foment before they ferment. So this is the idea of fomenting, right? Once you take in a source of information or knowledge or memory or interaction and people and their memories and their memoirs and their conversations and their problems and their difficulties and their joys, all of that, eventually that information resides inside you and it starts to foment. After a while, that fomenting becomes fermenting into wine. بالأمس كنت قانعا بالأدوار الصغيرة التي كنت أمثلها على مرسح محدود أو مسرح. He says yesterday, or yesterday is not like literally the yesterday, but in the past. Yesterday I was satisfied with small parts that I would perform on a bounded stage, a small stage. You know, like Shakespeare says, all the world's a stage, and one man in a lifetime plays many parts. Right? So Gibran is very much aware of this, and like Shakespeare, or Shakespeare like Gibran, they are very much saints of their crafts. They're aware, right? They're aware of what's going on, and they're aware of this breaking the fourth and the fifth dimension of their crafts to understand the meaning of life. All of Shakespeare's plays were performed on the Globe Theatre. But if you read The Tempest, for example, in that glorious monologue where, you know, a character says, "Our revels now are ended. These are actors, as I foretold you, have vanished into air, into thin air." Right? And he goes on to, in this great globe itself, a character in a play, a world within a world, is recognizing the great metaphor of the fact that he is a character in a play, which is breaking a wall, breaking a dimension, perceiving a higher reality. And then the play is being performed on a stage called the Globe Theatre, that's breaking another wall, another reality. And that Globe Theatre is part of a world that is itself vanishing, that is breaking the highest reality. That is a character within a play that's perceiving something that even human beings, the audience, cannot perceive. So it'd be like a human being perceiving a reality that an angels cannot understand. So Gibran is bringing all of that as part of his intimate growth as a human, as an artist first, as a human being more generally. He says, "Yesterday I was satisfied with the limited small parts that I would perform on a small stage. أما اليوم فصرت أرى تلك القناعة نوعا من الخمول." As for today, now, I am beginning to see that satisfaction to be a type of laziness. See that there is a time for the artist to be humble, and there is a time for him to be piercing in his ambition. You should not simply be satisfied. There is a time for that. There is a time for you, and in particularly at every moment in time, perhaps, you should be at once humble, recognizing that you have a muse, that you are chosen to be a channel for beauty to appear in color, sound, or word. And yet at the same time, you should be very blunt about your mission, that you are unique in your ability to do something. And you know, the Sufi mystics, they say that it is the valley that carries the greatest amount of water when it rains, in its humbleness and its humility. When you're humble, you're like a valley, but that is also your strength, your ability to carry. You're a vessel, right? And in the Quran, there is this verse that says, وَاللَّهُ أَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً فَسَالَتْ أَوْدِيَةٌ بِقَدَرِهَا. God brings water from heavens, and each valley, all the valleys, each carries according to its ability. So know your ability and recognize that your ability is in a certain type of humbleness, and we saw, and humility, and we saw how that has paid off in Gibran's own case, where he accepted the criticism of al-Manfaluti and he accepted the camaraderie and the fraternity with other writers, and that was his special ability. His ability to listen and to take in, and then to reverberate that in aphorisms like the Prophet, right, which has lasted until the present day. كنت أرى الحياة من وراء دمعة وابتسامة. I used to see life from behind the curtain of a tear and a smile. What poetry, right? أما اليوم فصرت أراها من وراء أشعة ذهبية سحرية تبث القوة في النفس والإقدام في القلب والحركة في الجسد. As for today, I see life now from behind the curtain of a golden magical golden magical rays that send or cast forth strength in the soul and to step forward in one's heart or through one's heart and movement in the body. And if he's saying there is a time for you to be humble and then there is a time for you to be ambitious, he's also now talking about the fact that there is a time for you to think with your emotions. And then there is a time for you to just do the work. Right? To just do the work. Whether there is a tear, whether there is a smile or not, you just get up and do the work. And you know, there have been many quotes by famous artists about the importance of doing the work. And one which I cannot remember who said it right now, but this artist, I believe writer, he said that talent is for amateurs. The rest of us just wake up in the morning and get to work. Do your work. And one of the things that we teach at Adwaq Center in our retreats is that some days you're going to wake up with a creative inspiration, and some days you're going to wake up without creative inspiration. When you wake up with a creative inspiration ready to work, you're like Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. Georges Bataille wrote a book about the accursed share, and it's a book in anthropology, but one of the ideas is that energy has to be spent, right? It has to transition. You know, like the third law, which says that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but it has to transition. It has to move from you as a channel to something else. If you don't spend it, if you don't spend that creative inspiration in something, in a work, if you don't channel it, it may become poison. It's power. And it can be poison if you do not channel it into. That's why what we're essentially saying when you have creative inspiration is you have a story to tell. It could be very small, one paragraph, a small poem. It could be a small musical piece, a small improv, a little painting, whatever it is, it has to be channeled. It's a story waiting to be told. And this story has a protagonist and an antagonist, a climax, evil to be overcome. Now, if you don't externalize that energy and that story, it's going to manifest through you, and you might be the antagonist. And the reason we tell our stories is to differentiate the antagonist from the protagonist, to see it clearly in front of us. Yeah? So, on the days that you wake up without a creative inspiration, Those are the days you show gratitude for when you do have the creative inspiration. Gratitude to whatever you choose to believe in, whether it is your higher self, the universe, God, you show gratitude. That I recognize, and it is your consciously, it's also a type of a shaman dance, requesting for that inspiration to return, to come anew in a new form. كنت يا أخي مثل طائر مسجون في قفص. I was, my brother, like a bird imprisoned in a cage. وكنت راضيا بالبذور التي كانت تضعها يد القدر. And I was satisfied with the seeds that are put in front of me through the hand of destiny. أما اليوم فصرت مثل طائر حريري أمامه بهجة الحقول والمروج الخضراء. As for today, I have become like a silken bird, in front of whom there lies the joy of meadows, or the joy of fields of harvest and green meadows. فهو يريد أن يطير سابحا في الفضاء الوسيع. I want to fly, or this bird, he wants to fly, swimming in the expansive space. ساكبا في الأثير أشباح روحه وخيالات أمياله. Pouring into the ether the apparitions of his spirit and the imaginations of his inclinations. We should stop here, because that one sentence is an immense treasure that reminds us of Gibran's famous Mawakib poem that we covered a short part of. هل فرشت العشب ليلا وتلحفت الفضاء. Right? Did you spread grass at night as your mattress and enveloped, covered yourself, or blanketed yourself with space? Right? And Gibran here is bringing some of those motifs back, which we will cover tomorrow as we continue our translations and readings. I hope and pray you find this as enjoyable, you have found this as beneficial and enjoyable as I have. Thank you very much and have a good night. Peace and love.